everybody, Gentrovo back here with another top 10 list. This time around, we're looking at the top 10 second basemen of all time, according to me, Gentrovo. So let's get this list started, see who I think are the best of the best. Coming in at number 10 is the all-time Chicago Cub second baseman of all time. This guy had 282 home runs, 9 Gold Glove awards, 8 Silver Sluggers, 10 All-Star games, 1 MVP, none other than Ryne Sandberg, the quintessential second baseman of the 1980s. Now, there is a big list of people that could have jumped in on this list going 10 and down. And Ryne Sandberg, for me, just kind of just latches on to that 10th spot. He didn't really play with some longevity as some of these other guys did, but what he did in the 80s was above and beyond any other second baseman during that time. There was maybe Lou Whitaker, but still Ryne Sandberg was a superstar. He was like a yearly Gold Glove person throughout the 80s. I say Ryne Sandberg's got to be on somebody's at least top 20 list, but for me he's number 10. For my next pick at number 9, this guy is not the most offensive-minded guy, even though he was a great slap hitter, 288 lifetime average, I think, around there. He's had 12 All-Star appearances, 3 Gold Gloves, an MVP even. What really stands out for Nellie Fox, my number 9, is his defensive prowess. But one thing that really stuck to me about Nellie Fox is that throughout the 50s, his consecutive All-Star appearances. So if you think about the 1950s, when you think about who was the best second baseman of that era, it has to be hands down Nellie Fox. Now, one thing I love about Nellie Fox, when you look up pictures about this for this guy, or just look through the history books, he always has like this bulge of, I think probably tobacco like sticking out his cheek. So that's kind of like the stereotypical picture of Nellie Fox that you see. So he's my number 9, Nellie Fox. Okay, for my number 8 choice, I went modern day second baseman. There are some guys that you can probably think of that would fit this bill, but for me, I'm going to go from my personal team that I love a lot. This guy won a World Series in 2009, and it is Robinson Cano. Now, he is a lifetime 300 hitter. He's won a couple of Gold Gloves. He makes everything just seem so easy. But this guy does have about 7 more years or so on his Seattle Mariners contract, which, you know, I'm very sad that he's not a Yankee anymore. But Robinson Cano, after I think he's done with his career, if he can continue on a pretty good pace for the remainder of his contract, will maybe even jump higher than number 8, because he is one of the best offensive second basemen of his era, and maybe for the past 20-25 years. There's a couple other guys here and there I think can compare, and I'll mention those in my honorable mentions. But for me, Robinson Cano is the best of the best. He is my number 8. Coming in at number 7 is yet another New York Yankee, and he was also a Cleveland Indian. Now, this guy won 5 World Series. He didn't have the longest career, and he just recently became a Hall of Famer roughly 6 years ago or so. His name is Joe Gordon. Now, this guy's defensive WAR is shockingly 22.4, which to me, I thought he wasn't that good at defense. But some of the numbers say otherwise. Said that he was a really solid second baseman, around 250 home runs lifetime. But again, for the 1940s and in that era, Joe Gordon was the best second baseman. He actually helped define what a power hitting like RBI second baseman would be. So that is my number 7. You can argue with it or not. This guy is phenomenal. His OPS plus is high. He is one of the best second basemen, offensively minded and defensively minded for that matter, to play the game. That's my number 7, Joe Gordon. Coming at number 6 is one of the most prolific on-base guys in second baseman history. He played for the Detroit Tigers. He won an MVP. His name is Charlie Gehringer, or Gehringer, however you want to say it. This guy was a perennial 300 hitter, knew how to draw walks before we actually before the experts said walks are really good. He was just a phenomenal hitter. His defense was okay, but for the 1930s Tigers, not Mickey Cochran, but Charlie Gehringer was the premier guy of the 1930s for second baseman. That's why he's my number 6. Coming in at number 5 is the best second baseman of the 1990s, and he played a little bit in the early 2000s. but he's won 2 World Series with the Toronto Blue Jays. His name is Roberto Alomar. And I think that one thing that tarnishes Roberto Alomar a little bit, I mean, he is in the Hall of Fame, but one thing that we kind of remember from the 90s is the fact that he spit on an umpire. But I think that's kind of been forgotten about, maybe not 100%, but he's more known today as like being a great switch hitter, a 300 hitter, a premier defender. He won several Gold Gloves. I think the number I have here is 10 Gold Gloves, 2 World Series again, 4 Silver Sluggers, over 200 home runs, an OPS plus of 116. Roberto Alomar was just everything that you wanted in the package of just a great second baseman. He was offensively minded. You can stick him anywhere in a batting order, and he was a glove. He was amazing. So that's my number 5 is Roberto Alomar. Top 4 for position 4. So I'm going Big Red Machine here. Joe Morgan, number 4. 2 MVP seasons from 75 and 76. Joe Morgan could steal bases, he can hit home runs, he could drive runners in, he had a decent glove. Now, a lot of people might think towards the last part of his career he started hitting in the 250, 240, 230 range, but he was still getting on base. If you look at Joe Morgan's WAR, it will blow your mind. He had an OPS plus of 132, 5 Gold Gloves, 10 All-Star games, over 260 home runs. Joe Morgan is just a phenomenal baseball player. And when you get to watch him play in some of the old videos, if you go watch those World Series, he's just a spark for that club. So that's why he's my number 4, and I couldn't keep him out of my top 5. So my number 4 second baseman, Joe Morgan. Here, I'm going to go number 3 with probably the greatest right-handed hitter of all time, and at least for the 1920s, Rogers Hornsby. Now, Rogers Hornsby, the reason he falls to number 3 for me is that his defensive prowess was not the best. However, there is not a better offensive player on this list than Rogers Hornsby, a lifetime 358 hitter. There was a stretch in the early 1920s for about 4 to 5 seasons where his batting average was an average over 400 as an average. That is insane. There's a period of 5 years during the early 20s where he led an OPS plus, and OPS, and slugging percentage. He was just the best hitter there could be. And so he has to be involved in a discussion when you talk about the best second baseman. Now, if the conversation is about defense compared to offense, I would argue that Rogers Hornsby's offense far outweighs his defensive capabilities. But I do like to have some defensive guys in there in my top 10, and I want to have that be part of the conversation. So that's why Hornsby does not fall into the top 2 spots. That's why I place him at number 3, Rogers Hornsby. Now it's the time I want to talk about honorable mentions. Before I get to my top 2 choices, I just want to name drop some people just in case in the comments down below you say, hey, why didn't you mention this guy? The first guy I want to mention is a present-day second baseman, Jose Altuve. He is clearly the best second baseman in the league right now, 2016. However, he's only played 4 or 5 seasons. He hadn't really had that longevity yet. So if he can keep it up, then maybe he will find a way in there. Bid McPhee, the guy with the most putouts ever by a second baseman, I think he should be on there. Bill Mazeroski. Now here's a guy that I really, really wanted to put on this list because he's in the Hall of Fame. He had the 1960 home run and the World Series that walked off. Just probably the best defensive second baseman in history of baseball. However, he never had an OPS over 100, I think, in his career. So that kind of kicks him out a little bit. I did think about Craig Biggio, but again, Brian Sandberg was more of a second baseman. Biggio played around a bit, even though he primarily played second base. I thought Sandberg was a better choice just for me. Dustin Pedroia, he is on the cusp. If he can play 4 or 5 more seasons, I think that he might crack it. Red Schoendienst, Bobby Doerr, Johnny Evers, he was in the discussion. And finally, the guy that I initially thought was putting on my list, but then he actually played more games at first base. This was Rod Carew, one of the greatest hitters of all time. They now named the American League Batting Championship after this guy. One more, Frankie Frisch.
Frankie Frisch should be talked about. Don't forget Frankie Frisch.
So those are my honorable mentions. Tell me what you think about them in the bottom, in the comments below. But now let's get to my top 2 choices. Now this is tough for me. When it comes down to the top 2, I always want to go with my favorite. And sometimes I don't. This time I did not go with my favorite for number 1. I went with my favorite for number 2. My number 2 choice for the best second baseman of all time is Napoleon Lajoie. Or like as a little kid, I used to say Lajoie. So I think it's pronounced Lajoie, so I'm going to stick with that. Won the Triple Crown in 1901, over 3,000 hits, was defensively amazing at second base. He is a guy, if you do not know who he is, you have to look him up and just look at his numbers of what he produced. And here's my favorite story about Napoleon Lajoie. In 1901, when the American League became in existence, he switched to Cleveland. He was with the Philadelphia club at that time, before that time, and they actually banned him from playing in Philadelphia because it was some contract issue or something like that. But like he couldn't play in Philadelphia, which I thought was just an absurd rule. But he was so great that even the Cleveland team went by the Cleveland Naps. Napoleon Lajoie, clearly, he has to be in any top 10 discussion. If he's not, then you probably don't know your second baseman that well. So he's my number 2, Napoleon Lajoie. Okay, here we go. Number 1. I think the greatest second baseman of all time is none other than Eddie Collins. Played for the White Sox and played for the A's. He is, without a doubt, probably the best offensive second baseman, really close to Napoleon Lajoie and Roger Hornsby. He had 3,300 hits. He won World Series with Connie Mack and Charlie Comiskey clubs. This guy was the best player of his era. And if you don't believe me and don't understand, he had a 142 OPS plus for a second baseman. For a second baseman, this is the era where they don't hit home runs that he had a 142 OPS plus. He was one of the best hitters in the league. He played in the era of Cobb, of Shoeless Joe Jackson, of Tris Speaker, and he is just as good as a hitter. He's a lifetime 333 hitter. How can you not say that Eddie Collins is one of the best second basemen or one of the best hitters of that era? So that's my number 1. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, if you agree or disagree. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Make sure you subscribe if you can or if you want to, and tell me your thoughts. What kind of list do you want to see next? What top 10 position do you want to see? Let me know, or maybe just another list. So take care.